Croydon's finances are off the rails, and they're so off the rails that the national government has sent in commissioners to essentially oversee the running of the council because they don't have faith in the current Conservative mayor's leadership. Well, it makes me sick to see empty homes and to see buildings being treated as gold bars for large companies. That to me is offensive when we have this housing crisis and when you walk around Croydon and see people homeless. On average, the South is much more affluent, has much more green spaces, and is also, I'm going to call it what it is, more likely to be white. And the north of the borough is much poorer, much higher rates of crime. The high street of tomorrow is different to the high street of yesterday. Because you can buy things online, that's where people are going to buy most of their stuff. So why do you go to the town centre? Two things: earning and belonging. And at the moment, there is a hole where our heart should be. Yeah, it's got to the point now when I'm knocking on doors in different parts of Croydon, people will say, oh, I'm not from Croydon, I'm from 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭. I'm not from Croydon, I'm from Thornton Heath, because they don't want to associate themselves with Croydon as an identity because the decline has been so strong. People tell me it's a ghost town. People tell me they're too scared to go there. And people tell me that they remember what it used to be like. It was advertised on the TV. It was like at Christmas time, the place to go. Aldous department store was like all sparkling. It was South London's Oxford Street, right? And the sense of loss of identity and community that has come from, I think, two things has been awful. The first is failed leadership on part of politicians, and the second is irresponsible leadership from big corporate developers. The criminals who drop the waste on the floor get a free fly tipping collection service, whilst the people who are doing the right thing have to pay £40 an item. If you dump waste on the street in Croydon, no one does anything. So guess what? People just do it again. And even commercial operators, they know Croydon's a light touch. They'll just come and put their waste there. Why bother going to the tip? Why bother paying to get rid of it? Just put it in Croydon. No one's going to do anything.
Welcome back to the High Stakes podcast. In May, millions of people up and down the country will head to the ballot box. I've done some homework, and in the past decade, we have had 4 general elections, a Brexit referendum, and numerous local elections. So you, as a voter, could be forgiven if you feel a little bit of electoral fatigue. And every single time we head to the polls, we are told exactly the same thing. This election is so much more important than the previous time we went to the ballot box. I don't want to sound cliche, but I can't help but feel this actually holds true. And the reason why I say this is because this is the first time we've had an election in the new era of politics. And what I mean by that is that in the past few years, we've usually had a 2-party political system. Usually it's between the Labour Party and the Conservatives. But what we're seeing in this new era of politics is a 4 to 5 party political system. There is so much more choice than what there previously used to be. So in these local elections, I'm going to shed some spotlight on a place which is close to my heart. And that place is Croydon. This is the place where my family decided to settle when they came from the Caribbean. And it's the place that continues to be home of my family and extended family. Now, Croydon has had its challenges, which are well documented. But a little bit like the product life cycle, what goes up must come down, and what goes down must come up. So in May, I guess for me, the decision for voters is not a case of if Croydon will go back to its glory days, but a matter of when. And the question that we really need to answer is who is the best individual? Because remember, there are 2 separate elections going on. We have the mayoral candidate. Who is the best individual? And who is the best political party to start to strategize, to steer those conversations to get Croydon back to where it used to be? Now, I must stress this before we start any conversation. This isn't a conversation about national politics. This is a conversation designed strictly for local issues. It's the things that affect us on a daily basis. So for example, if you go around your area and you think fly tipping is a problem, if you walk around your neighborhood and you're safer neighborhood teams that keep you safe, if it's a question that you have around affordable housing or in terms of the conditions of your housing, then this is most definitely a conversation for you. So today I'm joined in conversation with somebody who feels that they are positioned to steer this ship. And that is the mayoral candidate for the Labour Party, Rowenna Davis. Rowenna, thank you for joining me in conversation today.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here with a Croydon neighbour. I love the show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Who is Rowenna?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I start with my primary identity, which is I'm a mum of two. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, born in Croydon and growing up here. And also the thing that brought me to Croydon in the first place was teaching. So I moved here to become a teacher on London Road. Some of you might know 𝐼𝐻 right outside Lidl and West Croydon Station. And I would say when I moved to Croydon, I was quite idealistic as a teacher. I wanted to just go in and make a difference. And what hit me very quickly in that school, as is the case of all schools across the country, is that you can't get the best out of kids in the classroom unless you deal with what they're facing outside. And I just tell you very briefly, one young man who brought it home to me, a 14-year-old boy in my class, the best creative writer I ever had. I'm an English teacher, by the way. Okay. And he was just astounding, but he kept falling asleep in my lessons. Kept falling asleep. And I kept saying to him, what? I gave him a detention. I went to see him in detention about 2-3 times. I was like, why are you falling asleep? My lessons are great. I'm spending ages on these lessons. They're really fun. You're really good at them. What's going on? He's like, I'm tired, miss. Why are you tired?
Do you know what? For anyone that's previously been taught by Rowenna, I need to know what her lessons were truly like, because I personally feel like I can definitely resonate with people that felt some lessons were more exciting than others. So guys, I need you to let me know how exciting was Rowenna's lessons.
Yeah, I do. And I'll take that. And do you know what? One of the best things about this campaign is I've gone around knocking on doors in Croydon.
Yeah.
And I get like this giant adult opening the door going, Miss Davis? Because like they remember, they think they're in trouble. I was like, no. I've stopped setting homework a long time ago, but anyway, this young man, I have to go back to him because what he ended up telling me was that he was sleeping on a mattress with 5 brothers and sisters in overcrowded temporary accommodation. He was also a young carer for his younger siblings. And so when he got to school, he was just too tired. And if we don't deal in this country with the housing crisis, if we don't deal with the crime that these young people are facing on the streets, if we don't deal with the family breakdown issues, the issues around masculinity, then we can't expect the teachers to do it alone in that way. And I have so much respect for the teachers who are doing that job. It's the hardest job I've ever done. But they need a mayor who is on their side as well. And I was sick of, you opened this with like past politicians and perhaps disillusionment with politics. I was also tired of hearing promises without action. So I wanted to step up.
Wow, fantastic. And so I've heard I've been in a few rooms with you. Mm-hmm. I've also heard about what makes you the person that you are. And you've spoken a lot about, we always say in the Caribbean, there's this great saying that says it takes a village to raise a child, the community. And I've heard you talk about your community, about being a wife, about your 2 little girls. I've heard you show a lot of gratitude towards your husband. Can you tell me about how the community, the people behind you have made you the person, the individual that you are now?
So I would just like to take a moment for my grandma, who lived to be 100.
Wow.
And she only ever voted Conservative. Her whole life. I couldn't manage it.
No way.
And she was also the person who I respected in some ways the most in my family, who I could have the most honest political conversations with. During my teenage years, I'm not going to lie, we had a few arguments about the empire.
Yeah.
But I always knew that she was community minded, that she had strong values. She would do anything for her neighbors, that she was full of love and strength and decency. And she taught me very early on that just because someone has a different political opinion doesn't make them stupid, doesn't make them an enemy. It just makes someone who you can respectfully disagree with and work with. And I take that with me now. Every time I meet someone on the doorstep who disagrees, I don't think any less of them. I just think, if I'm going to be mayor, I'm going to look after all of you. And the last thing I'd say as well is just a little bit of a special mention to Croydon, because you touched in your intro about some of the stereotypes Croydon has. I've lived in quite a few places, but I chose Croydon to be my home because it's the best sense of community I've ever had. The way neighbours stepped up to each other, especially during COVID and the lockdown, was absolutely remarkable. And we have so much diversity in Croydon, but what we have that perhaps other areas don't have quite so much of is solidarity. Yeah. And I love that about Croydon. I love that my girls get to meet the people that we have in our streets. I love that they get to celebrate Eid and, you know, like all of these different, like 𝐾𝐿 they did the other day, all these remarkable festivals with great people. You know, we're truly blessed in Croydon. And, you know, a lot of those negative stereotypes come from people who haven't been there recently.
It's so funny you say that because funny enough, my nan lived to be over 100 as well. And when we was growing up, obviously I spent a lot of time with my grandparents because my parents worked. And we used to go to the 𝐷𝐾𝐿𝐺 My nan used to talk to everybody. So what was meant to be maybe a 45-hour trip to the 𝐷𝐾𝐿𝐺 turned into 2-3 hours because, you know, my nan was called Mrs. Harvey. Me see Mrs. Davis over there. Wait a minute, Juno. Wait a minute. And we're talking to everyone. And I do... That was something that really made my childhood special because in Croydon there was that real community spirit, and of course big in the church community. So when I was going to school, I went to Riddlesdown High School for secondary school. I always had to make sure, my dad used to say to me, walk good on the street, you know, Julian, because you never know who's watching. Because a lot of time, because of that kind of church community, someone in there knows that you are the son of Mr. and Mrs. Allward, or that you are, you know, your Mrs. Harvey's grandson. And by the time I got home, that report...
My phone's rung.
You think it's a joke. And let me tell you, if I didn't walk good, they would have no qualms about making sure I knew about it by the time I got home. I always had to make sure that, for example, I saw elderly people going on the bus, I'd be like, would you like to go first? Because you just don't know who they are. That community feel was so important for us. So I can definitely resonate with that.
And I love that. And like, you know, it's like everyone's your auntie. And, you know, and they could be there and the reports are going back. And that's what we need, right? Because the alternative is isolation, community breakdown, loneliness. You know, like I'm sure probably at that point when you were younger, you were like, oh my God, everyone's looking at me. But actually, if you look back, that you were being looked after. They all cared.
Definitely.
And they were helping you on the right path and probably helping you to get here.
Well, you're never too old to have a clip around the ear, you know. Even to this day, it's like the elders say to you, Julian, yes, auntie, what do you, can I have a glass of water? I'm a big man. I'm a big man in my 30s. Why are you still talking to me like I'm a young boy? But do you know what? I would never step out of line. Even to this day, I'm still terrified of the elders. And I think that's a big part of who I am today, and manners and the way that I conduct myself is that community, because you don't just get like a clip on the air from one family member. It's like there's 4 or 5 of them waiting to clip you around the air. So here's the thing. So you touched on, we're talking about the town centre you've spoken about there. This has caused a lot of hype for Croydon voters. In 2017, a £1.4 billion regeneration project was approved. Fast forward 10 years now in this decade, we have seen big franchises move out of Croydon, such as Five Guys and Turtle Bay. For some of you, I know some of you like a cocktail. Don't act like you've never been there, 'cause I know you have. And if you look at the 𝐷𝐾𝐿𝐺 Centre, there are a lot of units that remain vacant. What's going on?
Well, first of all, I think this entire election in May in Croydon is about for the heart of our town. And the heart of our town is the town centre. And at the moment, there is a hole where our heart should be. Yeah, it's got to the point now when I'm knocking on doors in different parts of Croydon, people will say, oh, I'm not from Croydon, I'm from 𝐾𝐿𝐺'Don. Or I'm not from Croydon, I'm from Thornton Heath, because they don't want to associate themselves with Croydon as an identity because the decline has been so strong. People tell me it's a ghost town. People tell me they're too scared to go there. And people tell me that they remember what it used to be like. You know, it was advertised on the TV. It was like at Christmas time, the place to go. Aldous department store was like all sparkling. It was South London's Oxford Street, right? And the sense of loss of identity and community that has come from, I think, 2 things has been awful. The first is failed leadership on part of politicians. And the second is irresponsible leadership from big corporate developers. Yeah, and if I get in, I will do absolutely everything to get these giant wasted sites back on track. And I'm talking about, like, those of you who know Croydon who are listening might know the Nestle Tower. You might know like the giant hole outside the town hall. You know, these sites are owned, in my opinion, by corporate squatters who've sat on the land and done nothing. at a time when we desperately need new homes, when we desperately need new workspaces, new community spaces. To me, it is absolutely unjustifiable and out of order to leave them rotting like that. And if I become mayor, that is going to be a top priority for me. I will use every single legal power the mayor has to bring in investors who genuinely want to come in on board and help our town. And for those ones who are really interested in getting things done, you will have no better friend than me. Like if you're an investor and you want to come to Croydon, my door is wide open. But if you are just going to sit there and let buildings decay and rot, like, I'm sorry, I'm going to fight you because we can't afford to waste the space.
You say, and I appreciate what you're saying. Let's think about consumer habits. When this project was officially announced back in 2017, the landscape looked a lot different then. We've seen a massive uptake in the digital marketplace. If I want to now purchase something, rather than going to our town centre, now generally people go and purchase something from Zara online. So do you think that maybe the original £1.4 billion regeneration project, that most of that project needs to be scrapped and needs to reconsider what that looks like? Because we talk about the high street, and I think that the whole high street model is completely different. I think now we have hubs. I've recently seen that 𝐼𝐸𝐶𝐾 has approved pedestrianising Oxford Street, and I think that's a fantastic move, because if you think about it nowadays, you have the fitness community, you have maybe like a performative arts community. So does the old school high street model still exist?
Brilliant question. I would say yes, but the high street of tomorrow is different to the high street of yesterday. Because you can buy things online, that's where people are going to buy most of their stuff. So why do you go to the town centre? Two things: earning and belonging. With earning, you want to be able to go to town centre to get a job, to make a living. Because if you've not got a town centre that provides jobs, no one's going to have any money to spend in the shops anyway. Yeah. Secondly, belonging. You go there to share physical space with your friends, your family, and people that you love. Think in a way that you can't do online. And I think COVID really showed us that we're social animals and we like to gather together. So the future of our town centres, in my mind, and I've done a report on best practice on this, is much more mixed use. And if you look at Westfield's current plans for Croydon, they do reflect that. So gone is the idea that we're going to have this big mall that's like beamed down like a big spaceship and lands in Croydon. That's gone. They want to get rid of the covered mall of the Whitgift and have like tree-lined streets that come down from Wellesley Road to North End, sort of nice shops on the bottom, flats on top, like small pocket parks, bigger spaces left for like, say, a gym or leisure centres or offices. So it would be much more of a kind of a mixed use community. And I think probably if they get it right, like a potentially nicer, more beautiful, more sociable space as well.
Yeah, because I do agree with you, because I just think that how a high street looks, we need to snap out of the idea of it being the town centre being high street again. I think, like you said, it's more about having hubs and community spaces. And you touched on a point there. You spoke about flats and housing. Now, let's talk a little bit about affordable housing, okay?
Can I just, before you do that, I just need to push back on one thing. You go to really rich areas and the conventional high street still exists. They've got the greengrocer, the baker, the butcher, the newsagent, and everyone actually really likes it. The reason you don't get them in areas like Croydon is that you don't have the disposable income to sustain them. Yeah. So if we can grow those wages, grow those jobs in Croydon, I do think there is more space for having like some of the more traditional elements of our high street that people love. It's not going to look the same, because I agree with you. It's mixed in with this other uses, but don't write them off, because the richer areas can still have them. And I think the poorer areas should have them too. So you're talking about jobs, for example. How are we going to grow the job market, attract businesses to set up in Croydon? What are your plans? Are you able to share how you intend to do that? Yeah, so at the moment, even though the election's not happened, I'm spending quite a lot of my time going around and meeting investors. And if you know any who are interested in Croydon, please direct them my way, because my aim is to try and get like a consortium of about a dozen investors to come together and think about investing in Croydon. Because for any one investor alone, it might not make sense to come in. But if they invest collectively, suddenly the whole town would lift, and that really becomes worthwhile. So I'm trying to do that. And something I'm thinking about recently, and I'd welcome your listeners' views and your views on this, is I actually think that Croydon is very well placed to be the job market for vocational excellence, because we've got more young people than anywhere else in London. We're like London's youngest borough, and we've got a lot of level 2 and level 3 qualifications. I think we should be saying, if we already train, for example, half of London's nurses. It's insane, yeah? It's an incredible thing that Croydon contributes. But I think the jobs like nurses, social workers, things like train drivers, there's a desperate need to train more train drivers, like culinary skills, for example. London has no cooking school right now. These are the kind of industries I would really like to target to bring to Croydon as a vocational centre of excellence, because these are the jobs that are, I think, AI proof, and that they're not going to disappear anytime soon. And I also think they're ones that a lot of people in Croydon could really go for with, huge passion and pride.
And what about business rates? Because one thing to me that seems a no-brainer is a train from East Croydon into central London is 15 minutes. So it seems like a perfect location without the hyperinflated cost of units within central London to base your business. So for anyone within the business sector, will you be doing anything to incentivize potentially businesses saying, hey, come and open up in Croydon? Or is there specific industries maybe that you may wish to target? One that comes to my mind, maybe I'm being a little bit biased here, is those that work in the Lloyd's of London marketplace. We know that a lot of insurance companies, general insurance companies, do have bases within Croydon. So it would make sense to attract other insurance companies into this area, again, with 15 minutes straight into the marketplace, and also very much close direct links to Gatwick Express if you need to go overseas, for example, to America, where people operate.
Yeah. So I was at Prologis this morning looking around their industrial park, and they were saying the reason that they're in Croydon is they've got 50 minutes to London, but also the train link out to the southeast. They've got Gatwick Airport on their doorstep. The rents are relatively cheap compared to central London. They've got a good, young, diverse place to be, so there's a lot of reasons why Croydon is a really fantastic place to operate. And I think that there must be more we can do to have a more strategic approach to attracting certain types of businesses. And I would really like to look at whether we can, in some cases, offer business rate discounts to some new businesses, or, maybe also I'm thinking for local young people who are thinking about starting or trialing their first business as well, not just the big companies, the big financial companies. But I'm sure we're going to talk in a minute about Croydon's financial situation. So I wish I could just say, every business would have a business rate cut. That would be my dream. But for the foreseeable future, I just can't look anyone in the eye and say that we could do it, because the finances don't allow it. So I've just got to be straight with them that it would probably be a smaller number of targeted discounts rather than any huge cut.
So going about this town centre regeneration, I'm a very logical person. What are the deliverables of your project? Because I think it's going to take probably longer realistically than 4 years in order to regenerate this town centre. So I think it would be, a little bit ambitious to say we are going to bring this back within that time frame when you think about planning applications, funding approvals, legalities of it. I think that's maybe not realistic. But what do you think is realistic, things that we can tangibly see? Because I think that's where people at the moment are becoming disillusioned a little bit with politics, is that we hear a lot of promises, but we don't really see it where we can pinpoint and go, I can see exactly what they meant. So what are the deliverables? Why have you chosen specifically to prioritize those deliverables? And what do you think that will be the impact of those things that you set out in the next 4 years?
That's a great question. And the honest answer is we're still working through that in the manifesto process that we're working on at the moment. And the first thing I'd say is, for the big long-term picture, we want to set up a land commission, and we're asking your listeners and everyone in Croydon to help us crowdsource the worst 50 big, decaying, rotting, derelict, void sites across Croydon. And we will compile a list of them. And within 10 days of office, I want to start seeing a plan of what we've done for each one of those sites to try and get them moving. Yeah. And there's various levers that you can pull. In some cases, it might just be, we need to sit down with the developer and the investor and open the doors to them and see what they need and try and support them. In other cases, we might have to be looking at sanctions for those people who are leaving sites in a dangerous condition. And I would hope that, you know, if I get elected in 4 years, you are right, Croydon Town Centre is not going to be rebuilt in 4 years. But I want everyone in Croydon at the end of that 4 years to feel like we are going in the right direction.
Yes.
You said at the moment that people feel like, oh, I've lost Turtle Bay, I've lost Waitrose, you know, I've lost H&M. It's all going in the wrong direction. But I want them to feel at the end of that 4 years, do you know what? We are going in the right direction. And if we keep going on this path, Croydon's going to get restored as the great powerhouse of South London once again. But in the very short term as well, because I don't want to duck your question, I do think there's some work to be done around getting pop-up stores open in some of those derelict properties, even on a short-term basis, so that, you know, young people looking at starting their own business, as I said, can go in there maybe for a peppercorn rent, just to be able to try something, get their business started. I would love to have more festivals and cultural activities in that town centre to bring the life back into it, the joy back into it. You know, especially, you know, there's a lot of good places to eat in Croydon, aren't there?
100%.
Yeah. So I think, like, you know, why is London's food festival not there? Do you know what I mean? And can we get Fairfield halls properly being run by and for the community, so that is a real, like, showcase of all of Croydon's talent, for example. So I think there are some things we can do in the short term, but longer term, yeah, it you know, we can't duck that. You know, if we're serious about regenerating Croydon, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of money.
And you touched on a good point there. Alders, we started to see the regeneration of some of those units. Now, Sky moving in, a coffee shop, a florist, and a women's clothing store, I don't think truly incentivizes people to come back to Croydon Town Centre. So if I'm an investor looking at this, because it's all about footfall, right? By footfall, we're talking about the opportunity to distribute our product, right? And the more footfall that there is, the better chance there is that you're actually able to sell it. I don't think that these current stores are going to increase the footfall because there's a really good florist in Fulton Heath. There's tons of great coffee shops in South Croydon. And I can just call Sky rather than having to go physically into the store. What would have made more sense to me would be to start that Alders regeneration with a banking hub. Now that makes sense, because I remember, especially when I was growing up as a young child, part of the reason why people went to the town centre is because everyone went there on a Saturday morning to pay their bills, right? So if you're already in the town centre and you're paying bills, well, then I might as well pop to Sainsbury's, used to be in the Whitgift Centre. We did a bit of food shopping. Oh, and then we'd go to the department stores, Alders, C&A, you name it. So there's almost like a logical steps that you would take throughout your day in the town centre. But that's not there now, because like I said, when you start with Alders, really there should be a banking hub. It isn't. So if this sets the precedence for this regeneration, are there any plans maybe to adjust the thinking around where it's currently heading?
Well, it's going to be depending on how people vote, because those few stores, which I think are quite cosmetic changes, as you say, in the grand scheme of the town centre, are the legacy of 4 years of this Conservative mayor. That's all he did. Yeah. And in my mind, it's just not good enough. And he kind of did that change and showed off about it in my mind, because he never had the courage to go after the really big sites. It was too hard. It was too difficult. Yeah. And if I get in, we are going to have those big fights. And we are also going to have a bigger, more inclusive vision for that town centre. And I think you're totally right, Julian, that the best town centres now, they bring you in for one thing, but then they tempt you to stay with another. Oh, look at that really nice place. I could have lunch outside with the seating. Oh, look, I'll just pop into the gym for a bit. Now I've done that. And oh, there's like some street theatre going on. So maybe I'll stay and have a look at that. And by the way, I forgot I need to pick up something for my friend's present, you know, and it's that kind of lovely journey of just coaxing people to want to stay and spend their money there, you know, rather than just passing a few stores that don't really feel relevant to yourself or your demographic.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And this kind of rolls me into another point about this regeneration. And we touched upon it. Finances. Croydon's financial problems are very well documented. And I've been doing a little bit of homework. And it appears to me that Croydon, if I'm correct, has £2.8 billion worth of assets when I look at the balance sheet. Not bad. But the issue is that Croydon also has £2.1 billion of liabilities. 1.6 billion of that being long term. So what we're talking about here is debt, essentially. So if you looked as well, the cost of running the services, essential services. So if we look at adult, social and healthcare, in 2024 to 2025 statement, it cost roughly around £280 million to run that service. To run children's, young people and education service cost Croydon Council 411 million. Croydon Council has overspent by £54 million in the 2024 to 2025 statement. So essentially what's happening in Croydon is that Croydon has high debt, which it needs to service, okay? It has very high ongoing service deficits and a cash flow problem. Now, this also does tie in, of course, to something like a regeneration, because not all, but two key metrics that most capacity providers, businesses look at when you're going to invest in somewhere is solvency and capital adequacy. Two things that Croydon doesn't appear to have. And for me, if you're going to win an election, anyone, the two main topics are the town centre and, most importantly, the finances. Mm-hmm. So where are we currently with Croydon's finances? And I'm sure, I believe that there has now been commissioners that have been allocated to Croydon. For some of our voters and listeners who don't know what commissioners are and how this whole process starts, can you just give us a little bit of background, please?
Croydon's finances are off the rails. And they're so off the rails that the national government has sent in commissioners to essentially oversee the running of the council, because they don't have faith in the current Conservative mayor's leadership. I think the key figure for anyone paying those council tax bills that are very high in Croydon under this mayor, the key figure to know is every time you pay that council tax bill, 17% goes to debt interest. It doesn't go to looking after vulnerable adults. It doesn't go to the parks. It doesn't go to cleaning the streets. It doesn't go to regeneration. It goes to debt interest, not even paying down the debt. And that to me is a criminal waste of public money. And so we desperately need a mayor who is going to be able to get us out of the debt problem. We are not going to tax and cut our spend away out of a problem that big. You can't. You'd have to raise taxes by a crippling amount. You'd have to cut services to the point when you'd breach your legal duties. So the only way out is to restructure the debt with the help of national government. And I think I'm the best person placed to do that because we have a Labour government and I'm Labour and I know these people. Yeah, I have a trusted, respectful relationship with them.
And when you say, sorry to disturb you there, Rowenna, when you say restructuring debt, can you explain what you mean by that, please? Because for some of our listeners who may not know what that entails and what that actually means, and what commissioners are as well.
Sure. So commissioners are independent experts who've been appointed by national government based on their years of experience across local government and the private sector to come in and oversee the running of a council. Yeah. You might have heard the same thing, like if a hospital goes into special measures, that means the independent experts come in and take over the running of it. It's very similar. It's like a parallel for that. Yeah. So that's what we've got in Croydon. And when some people might say, okay, we need to write off Croydon's debt. That's a big thing to ask. A large amount of our debt is not to private companies, but to the Public Works Loan Board, which means to ask the government to write it off is to ask British taxpayers from the rest of the country to bail out Croydon. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, okay, you can't just forgive the debt. Yeah. But maybe we could put it in a much longer term, lower interest rate account that meant that the repayments could be sustainable for us. So a bit like if you were struggling to pay your mortgage, you'd go to the bank. You wouldn't say, forgive me my mortgage, but you might say, can I have my payments reduced so I can pay it back over a longer period to make this sustainable to me? Yeah. And that's what I'd be asking for Croydon.
Fine. I totally understand that. But even with this sheer level of debt, because Croydon's in a vicious trap at the moment. Realistically, even if you do get to renegotiate, restructure the debt, you're still going to have a huge amount of deficit still to service.
Yeah. So
where will the rest of, not the rest of, but how can you raise additional funds in order to improve Croydon's financial situation? Because working alongside national government to restructure debt won't be enough.
That is true. At the moment, when I speak to my neighbours in Croydon, they don't feel like this council is genuinely offering value for money. And I think they're right. The council wastes so much money in a number of areas. One, consultants. I've had 3 separate sets of consultants costing millions and millions of pounds to the taxpayer. I personally have not seen what value they bring. 2, agency workers. The agency worker bill has ballooned massively under this Conservative mayor. We know that means that vulnerable people get a less good service because they got transient workers coming in and out like a revolving door, but it also is very expensive to pay an agency worker to come in and do a job compared to someone who you employ long-term and full-time. So there are a couple of areas of waste where I think we can really turn things around. And I think, it's also completely fair if we're asking the national government to help us out. They need to know that we've got our own house completely in order. They need to know that we've done everything in our power to save money and there's nothing left to do. Because otherwise it's not fair, to ask for national taxpayer money to help us. So you're totally right. There's a bunch of things we can do. And I think just like working more innovatively as well. I've talked about having, council officers like housing officers and tenancy officers. Why one day a week you should be out working in the community, not in the office. You should be placed inside community hubs or inside churches or inside soup kitchens where you're actually meeting the people on the front line who need the work and you don't always expect everyone to come to you. That would, I think, you've still got the same people employed for the same number of hours, but I think that would mean a much better service for people and probably a more enjoyable experience if you're an officer who really cares about serving the community, that you actually get to be out there on the front line.
And what about potentially overseas investment or private investment? Because in my head at the moment, there are other councils up and down the country who are struggling and who need immediate help too. And realistically and this is not about, national politics, but across the board, the economy has some challenges at the moment. So for us to rely on national government, some people might say is a pretty big ask and you're going to need to think outside of the box. So for example, I don't know, if you look at a lot of large organizations and a lot of countries have their own asset classes that you can actually build, so which allows you to generate huge amounts of revenue, for example. That could be something that you look at alongside attracting capital. What other mechanisms are you going to use to improve Croydon's finances alongside the support of commissioners, the government's restructuring debt?
So I think if I when I'm out and about getting private investment into the borough, that's for Croydon, the town. That for me, I think is the priority. It's for the people. I want them to be investing in those private brownfield sites up and down the borough. I haven't heard yet, but please tell me if I'm wrong, of councils getting in private investment from companies in that kind of way. And I think it's more complicated because they've got, councils have got quite a lot of procedural rules in place, to get that kind of thing done. But yeah, so in general, I would say we have to ask for public support in restructuring the debt. I'm not sure any private provider would want to invest in a sinking council anyway. But where the private investment should be sought and should be secured is out there in the community. Because there's so much money out there in the world, right? You look at 100%. Inner city London, you look at the theatres, the community centres, the charities, the foundations. We should be saying to them, why is all that money being sucked into central London? Why can't Croydon have some of that? Because I think they'll get a good return for it as well.
So, council tax. This has risen today up by 33% in Croydon. That's a lot. I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, can you make some guarantees that council tax won't rise? Because I don't think that's realistic. I think situations are always changing, all right? And I think we do need to give politicians a sense of grace when it comes to that. But in terms of the council tax, what can be done to make sure that over the next few years, I'm going to say that this council tax is controlled?
So first of all, I think it's unforgivable that in a cost of living crisis, the Conservative mayor has raised council tax by 33%. For a bit of perspective, that is more than any other London borough. And
Wow.
Croydon is not a rich borough. You know, people are really working hard to just be able to eat and heat the house. Yeah. And for a bit of perspective, that rise is on average for an average home in Croydon, £600 extra a year.
Wow.
How many extra night shifts do you have to work for that? How many hours away from your children do you have to do to make that up? How many extra cab rides if you're a cab driver? You know, it's just unforgivable. And so what I've said is that I will never raise it by that amount. I just couldn't. I just think it would break the people to be able to do it. I wish I could say I could cut it, but I can't. I just can't. Not without seriously putting at risk children's social care, adult social care. And also, but what I would say is that if we get Croydon Town Centre going, again, to go back to the town centre, that will be a huge source of income, not just for ordinary people in Croydon, but for the council as well. That would start generating extra income in that we could put into other services too.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think that's why I said, I think we need to give politicians some grace, because when people talk about the black hole in politics, it's not a case of missing money. I must clarify this. What they're actually talking about is funds that need to be raised. And one of the key ways that government, local and national level raise funds is through taxation, such as local council tax. So I must stress this here, that when council tax is raised, this is not because there's a black hole deficit. It is for the greater good to a certain extent. Housing. Now, I've been doing a little bit of homework on this, and this is something that really resonates with me too, because I myself have been going through this property purchase journey. Now, the average home in Croydon is £400,000. The average rent of a one-bed flat is £1,500. And the average first-time buyer property price is £338,000. Okay? But the thing is, we know that nationally, the average wage is around £37,000 to £40,000. And I remember a few years ago when I was looking to rent a place, I was looking at the Enclave apartments by East Croydon, because it's a lovely complex. East Croydon's fantastic, great links into central London. And I think it was about £1,500 all inclusive for bills. But then there was another £250 for parking, because it doesn't actually include parking. So let's call that more like £1,750. And at the time, I'm pretty sure that my take-home might have been about £2,425 after tax. So that's about well over 50% of my earnings. That doesn't really work. So, and I know there's been well-documented issues in terms of damp. We're not gonna highlight where those places are, but people have some housing issues within their homes within Croydon. How are you going to tackle this?
The housing crisis in this country is out of control, all over the place. The figures, as you have eloquently outlined, just don't add up. What people can bring in, even if they work so hard, does not result in them being able to own their own home or even be able to have a safe, affordable place to rent. We've seen only this week in Croydon a huge number of forced evictions from Delta Point, where vulnerable people who have always paid their rent on time, always met every housing check, are just being turfed out with like a number of weeks' notice. And I've been listening to their stories this week that have been haunting me. So that kind of crisis can't be solved by like one mayor alone. What it needs is a national government committed to a serious long-term house building program. We just need massive more supply in this country. And the failure of the Conservative government to do it for so long is what has compounded these problems. What I can do locally is, like I said, with that land commission, identify all those disused brownfield sites and bring together house builders and try and get them moving. Not just for the like single person's flats who people who want to commute into London, but I want to see family homes, affordable family homes for people in Croydon so they can stay here long term. And I'm also really interested in other models of housing, like cooperative housing, which I think is quite interesting, and also the almshouse models are very interesting about how to support people.
And can you just elaborate on what those models are for those people that don't know?
Yeah, so almshouses, for example, they've been great. There's the 𝐻𝐾𝐿 Foundation that does them in Croydon really well. And, you get a more charitable foundation, like the 𝐻𝐾𝐿 Foundation, to fund some house building. And they're traditionally for older, more vulnerable people who have to apply to go there, and they have to be below a certain income threshold. So they're not for everyone. They're for more people on average wage or lower than average wage. They get to move in and they're often, they're good quality. And there's also community workers or health workers based on site as well. So it's less like, put someone in an individual room and leave them to rot. It's like, it's actually having supported living on site. And traditionally, they've always been for older people, perhaps disabled people who may need some kind of care. But I think, for young adults, this might be a really good model, especially if you have some vulnerabilities or you're just coming out of care, being able to live in a place where you have your independence, but you also have community support built in on site. I think it's a really good idea.
And what about any schemes? So what I do know that I think the correct terminology is discounted market scheme, or it might be called the first home schemes, where essentially it's a strategic partnership between a council and a developer. And that means that you buy your house at a discount. So I do know that Dandra, I believe they've called, have done it with Weldon District Council. Pentland Homes have done it in terms of Kent. And the criteria is that you might have to been a resident in that borough for a year or have a business or something in it. I think this is a great way to get people onto the ladder. So the discounts are like 30% off the home. And when you sell the home, for example, if you want to, you just need to sell it at that discounted price, but that still takes into consideration inflation. So if your home still goes up by 30%, then you're still able to get that part of the profit too. Have you thought about potentially having those conversations with developers, those kind of strategic partnerships?
I would love to have those conversations. And, I'm really keen to learn from some of the best practice examples that you talked about. I guess my thing is just, are we sure it's genuinely affordable? Because we get so many promises from politicians about affordable housing. But when you dig into what the affordable rate actually is, it still seems way too out of reach for many, many people. But what I loved about what you said is that kind of giving local people who've already made a contribution to Croydon, like that extra help. Because I think that's important. Like if you're giving to our borough, you should be rewarded for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And my other, I guess maybe concern for voters would be, we are seeing a shift in how housing is seen. So I think a lot of the new builds are vacant. They look fantastic, shiny, but no one is buying them. And the reason for that are these property now is not built to be people's homes. They are built to be assets of large institutions such as pension funds, investment funds, because they're now seen as a stable income, especially with the geopolitical situation being so unstable. You know that if you own that unit, you're collecting that rent, that pension stays stable, right? So can you give us any type of assurances that when we do get new developments in Croydon, that the local residents, Croydonians like myself, we're not going to be priced out because actually developers are coming in? Yes, they built all these units, but hang on, guys, we're going to price them at 1.5 million, like some of them at Battersea, and no one can afford them.
Well, it makes me sick to see empty homes and to see buildings being treated as gold bars for large companies. That to me is offensive when we have this housing crisis and when you walk around Croydon and see people homeless. So one thing that I think the current mayor has done is to increase the empty homes tax. I would want to see it increased to the maximum possible to be able to okay, you can keep your empty building there if you want, but I'm going to take one shed load of money from you if you do, and I will use that to buy proper housing that people can actually live in.
Please do. Please do.
That would be my take on that.
Because honestly, Rowenna, housing is so expensive.
Yeah, but I've got to say one thing though. There may be, there are some sites in Croydon, like the one opposite the town hall and stuff. For me to be able to get a private developer to do something on it, I would rather have like some flats that are a bit more expensive than nothing. Yeah. So yes, I will fight for affordable housing, but my real priority is we have to get the town centre up and running. Yeah. And we have to incentivize the developer to do it. And if we make it totally unaffordable for the developer, then they may walk away. Yep. So we have to, as the mayor, you have to walk that line because we have to get that town centre moving. And once we got the town centre moving, my hope is that also, you know, we have more money coming in to be able to do more of the housing we want to see, but it's going to be a mixture. Yeah. Not every home you might see under my administration might be affordable for everyone. I'm just saying that because I want to be upfront and we've got to be straight with people.
Sure. Sure. No, I absolutely agree with that. Appreciate it. And also, what we also see a lot of the time in London as well is that a lot of these new builds are apartments, but we still love our homes, houses. We still want to have barbecues with loved ones. So is there any chance, I know it's difficult to say until potentially that you are voted in, but do you have plans to maybe make sure that some of these conversations involve a mixture of apartments, but also house dwellings?
Yes. I'm just going to answer that. Yes, it's so important. I meet voters on the doorstep every day who are like, you know, we want families to grow up and grow old in Croydon. We don't want you to just move here and commute into London for 5 years and then get your real home somewhere else. We want long-term families who committed to our place and want to raise their children here. Because
that's one of my fondest childhood memories, whether it was at home or at my grandparents, that I could just go outside and we could just play outside the front door.
Yeah.
Until my name was called and then I knew it was dinner time, or maybe I had to do homework or pretended to do homework.
Yeah. Well, one thing we haven't talked about so far, which I did just want to raise, is the disparity between north and south of our borough. Because you are much more likely to be able to have that garden and that huge green space if you live in the south. And I don't deny our children that beautiful space in the south, but the children in the north need it as well. And where I was a teacher, there were very few green spaces, and the ones that were there felt very abandoned, derelict, downtrodden. You know, Canterbury Recreation Ground, have you been there recently?
Yeah.
You know, that's around the corner from my old school. That should be a first-class football pitch, developing new young talent and enabling people to have fun with their friends.
Melfort Park.
Yeah, Melfort Park, exactly.
We used to spend so much time there because you've got the basketball courts.
Yes.
The cages right at the back at Melfort Park. So we go there and play basketball. And then a lot of people play cricket in the summer in the main part of Melfort Park.
Exactly. And that, you know, those children in the north of Borough, I think about them a lot. And, you know, what they went through during lockdown by not having some of those spaces to be able to turn to locally. And I think it's really important that any mayor addresses that inequality.
And that's a really good point that you've touched on there. So is there a disparity between north and south of the borough? Is there a divide?
Yes. So, of course, there are also people struggling in the south, and there is also poverty in the south, and we can't ignore that. But on average, the south is much more affluent, has much more green spaces, and you know is also, I'm going to call it what it is, more likely to be white. And the north of the borough is much poorer, much higher rates of crime, much higher rates of deprivation. Far more issues with terrible housing, a lot more fly tipping in the north. And so, this is something that Croydon desperately needs a mayor for the whole borough and not just one half of it.
I can't knock you for your honesty. I really do. I think our voters and listeners will really appreciate that. I think for whatever project that you do, it's important to recognize where the problems exist and lie. And it definitely sounds like you have done your homework. You've done your diagnostics. And I think that really rings home there with what you've just said. You also said something there about the dreaded fly tipping. Now, guys, Croydon has been voted on record having the worst fly tipping in England. Over 53,000 fly tips were recorded. And this is very recent data that has been published. That's over 1,000 fly tips per week. That's a huge amount. To put into context, of the top 10, 7 out of 10 of them are London boroughs. I must also stress this. So there does seem to be a widespread problem throughout London. It's not just Croydon. But within that, not only does Croydon top it, but it does by quite some margin too. What's going on?
First of all, it's disgusting. like I've had 2 children born in Croydon. I've pushed my prams over rotting waste. I have had my kids pick up stuff off the street, from dirty mattress parts to rotting engines. I mean, it's unhygienic, it's unsafe, it's unsightly. It just brings down our area so much. But when people raise it with me, I actually am happy because it is easy to solve. The reason Croydon has the worst rates are 2 things that we can fix. 1, there is no enforcement. So there's no fines, no CCTV, no prosecution. If you dump waste on the street in Croydon, no one does anything. So guess what? People just do it again. And, even commercial operators, they know Croydon's a light touch. So just come and put their waste there. Why bother going to the tip? Why bother paying to get rid of it? Just put it in Croydon. No one's going to do anything. So we are going to get strict on enforcement. Number 2, we have to make it easier for people to do the right thing. Now, if you have, say, an old cot in your house that you need to get rid of, maybe you live in an overcrowded place. To get to the tip, you need to have a car. Yeah?
This is it.
Or you need to pay the council to take it away, which is quite a lot of money.
It's expensive.
It's like £40.
£40 per item.
Per item, yeah? So if you're a bit poor and you're just struggling and you're just trying to get by, you're probably just going to put it out on the street. You probably don't feel that great about it, but you just need to get rid of it. You desperately need some space. You're trying to do your best, yeah? Other boroughs like Merton have big skip days where every few months they bring a giant skip to an area and everyone can get rid of their bulky waste for free. This is such a good scheme. It helps people do the right thing. It gives them something back for the taxpayer money that they're paying. And also, it probably saves us money in the long term because we're not having to pick up all these fly tips that get reported.
And you have is it an app, if I'm correct, that people at the moment can record any fly tips? My issue with this is that if you report a fly tip, and is it within 48 hours it must be removed, doesn't that just incentivize people to fly tip? Exactly. And second of all, don't we as Croydonians still have to pay for this? It's not for free.
Yeah. So it's called Love Clean Streets, and it actually works really well. Like I report 20 fly tips a week, I think, at the moment, just by using it. And, it does help get rid of the waste. The point is that under the system, you are right, that the criminals who drop the waste on the floor get a free fly tipping collection service, whilst the people who are doing the right thing have to pay £40 an item.
Precisely.
And you are totally right that to pick up these 50,000 plus fly tips a year, the taxpayer is paying for every single one. Yeah, which is why we have to address the root causes by giving consequences to people who do this and helping people do the right thing.
Yeah, good point. I think fly tipping is a big one. Really, really big topic because it also attracts infestation of mice and rats. And I just think that in a community that you should care about, it's horrible to see.
Yeah, and Croydon is blessed with some amazing architecture, beautiful heritage, wonderful streets. And at the moment, they're just clogged and hidden behind these mountains of waste. So it's, I always say to people on the doorstep, my 3 priorities: the town centre, number 1, crime and safety, number 2, and 3 is just cleaning the place up.
Amazing. And you spoke about your 3 main priorities. And I just want to finish on one final topic. Those manifesto pledges for different areas of the borough. So I'm a Croydon, but I'm a Thornton Heath guy, okay? What are you going to do for my people in Thornton Heath?
Well, one of the things I've loved the most about this campaign is that we've gone up and down the different villages of Croydon and held listening exercises there. Okay. And we've invited all local people to come in, people of all parties and none, come in and share what you think your area needs, what you love about your area, and what is distinctive about it. And that has been informing the manifesto. And the manifesto will come out in the next couple of weeks, actually, so be able to see it. But where I remember from the listening event in Thornton Heath, people loved their neighbours. They loved the high street, in the fact that they can get everything really locally. They loved the transport links. They liked some of the community centres and things that were there. They definitely loved their neighbours, but they were worried about HMOs, so houses of multiple occupancy, causing antisocial behaviour. Fly tipping was massive. Crime and safety was massive, particularly around Melfort Park and some of those areas. And they wanted, even though they loved having the high street there, they did want a more diverse high street, if I remember. They wanted different types of shops. But how does that reflect Your experience with Fulton Heath.
I think we can buy into that.
You can buy into that. Yeah. Anything you'd add to the list?
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you will.
But I'm also a Purley boy because I went to school south of the borough.
You should run for mayor. You're north and south.
No, I don't wish. I'll leave that to you. You are far more skilled and adequate to do that than I am. But I also went to school, Riddlesdown, Honister Heights.
Yeah.
What are you going to do for my people south of the borough? They also want something from you too.
Yeah, so we also have had listening exercises in the south as well. And interestingly, some of the issues that come up are the same. There's real concerns around safety and antisocial behaviour, especially around some of the train stations. Young people have been real targets for like mobile phones and things like that were an issue. I think the love of high streets and district centres is really important to people, like places like Purley, Coulsdon, Sanderstead. People want to see them treasured and loved as well. And what else came up? Yeah, fly tipping a little bit less, I have to say. Yeah, because in the south, it generally is better than the north.
Because they would say protecting, like what you said, their beautiful countryside. The green spaces are amazing. In fact, funnily enough, I remember when I first went to Riddlesdown, walking to school, there's like 3 different trails, right?
Yeah.
And there was like deer that were running across me. Rowenna was terrified. I'm from Fulton Heath. Everything we have is brick.
Yeah.
So I was like, what on earth is going on here?
But there's not enough links between the north and the south.
Like, there isn't.
If anyone is listening from the north, they need to go to Happy Valley.
Yep.
They need to go to Croydon Woods.
Yep.
They need to go to like some of these incredible sites that there are. And one of the things I would love to do that's quite fun for Croydon is like either a Croydon marathon or like a Croydon like cross-country run, which takes you through all of the most beautiful sites of Croydon. I think it would put us on the map. We could have people from across the country come and see the true Croydon, the real beauty of like our architecture, our heritage, and those lovely green spaces.
Tour de France, Costa del Croydon, High Rocks Croydon, we're coming for it all apparently according to Rowenna. I absolutely love that. And Rowenna, before we wrap things up, where can people find you? Because I believe that the slogan of your campaign is people first.
100%.
So that must mean that I must be able to get in contact with you. Yeah. So guys, where can we keep up to date with the latest announcements of your manifesto, your campaign? Where can people ask you questions? Where does this all happen?
So I'm on basically every social media platform. If you search for my name, Rowenna Davis, and my mum and dad did make up my first name. So it's ROWENNA. It's not Rowena for anyone out there.
It's Rowenna.
It's Rowenna Davis, yeah. But and I really mean this when I say like we're working on the manifesto right now. If your listeners have bright ideas for Croydon, I want to hear from all of you and any of you. Please contribute them. You can drop me an email as well. If you just Google me online, that's going to come up very, very easily. It's really important that if we want to regenerate our town, it can't be done with one person. It has to be with all of the talent and all of the love that Croydon has. And it's just a big, open, warm invitation to your listeners to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Rowenna, thank you for joining me in conversation today. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I do think that we've answered some of the questions that really matter to Croydonians, because they have a really big decision to make at the ballot box in May. Like I said, this conversation is not about if Croydon will get back to where it was, but a matter of when. And we really need to make sure the person that we choose to be the captain of that ship knows exactly what Croydon needs and wants and puts the people first, most importantly. Yeah. And once again, guys, if you do have any questions, please do let me know your thoughts in the comments, in your descriptions. As Rowenna said, she's available on all the different platforms. Wishing Rowenna the very best for the rest of her campaign and wishing you all the successes in your future endeavors. Rowenna, from myself, from the team, take care until next time.
Thank you so much.